When I talked about the worst movies of 2019 a few weeks ago, I mentioned that this past year was one of many disappointments for me. A lot of people had amazing cinematic experiences throughout the year, and while some had enthralled me, plenty of others left me feeling cold. Even when my expectations were non-existent, I ended up being let down by a lot of films. However, where some faltered, others triumphed. In fact, 2019 was also a year of considerable cinematic surprises, and that is what I intend on sharing with you today, the movies that surprised me and disappointed me the most last year. Keep in mind though that a movie's inclusion on this list does not mean that it's either great or bad. You may or may not see some of these on my actual top 10 best movies of 2019 list, but even so, these movies are simply ones that went below or above my expectations. For this video, I ordered top 5 lists for both my disappointments and surprises, and I will go through each of them in order at the same time. With that, let's get started. My 5th biggest disappointment was It Chapter 2. The original It was one of my biggest surprises for 2017, so you can imagine how let down I was by the lackluster, adult-centric conclusion to that narrative. All of the cards were seemingly in place for an effective, fun, and compelling second half of Stephen King's story. You also had Andy Muschietti back as director, Bill Skarsgård came back to play Pennywise, and there were awesome new cast members such as Jessica Chastain and James McAvoy. It's just a shame that so much of this movie felt incessantly repetitive and cliched to the point where I couldn't see any real justification of the near 3-hour runtime. Oh well, at least this doesn't change the original's status as a good one-off story. My 5th biggest surprise was Batman vs. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. The awesome crossover we should have gotten was Batman v Superman, but that ended up being one of the most embarrassing superhero films ever made. The one that I assumed would suck, Batman vs. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, became everything that BVS wasn't, and I can't begin to tell you how happy that made me. I'm not even that nostalgic for the Turtle Boys, but I had a blast anyway, and I mean that in a completely unironic way. For the short but sweet animated joint provides the exact kind of action, tongue-in-cheek humor, and ridiculously awesome fan service moments you would expect from something like this. The cast and crew knew exactly what they were making, and they put some legitimate effort into giving us a memorable, worthwhile cartoon. My 4th biggest disappointment was Yesterday. Oh, this was a painful one to include, believe me. As a huge Beatles shill, I was really hoping that this would somehow carve out a fascinating, inventive story out of the idea of someone adopting their music after everyone in the world forgets about it. With Danny Boyle involved as director, my hopes were even higher. But what the plot ended up being was about as cliched and predictable as you would expect from that premise. The romance was undercooked, the humor was weak, and the story honestly didn't even make sense when the concept was already wacky to begin with. Despite how lackluster the movie was though, the soundtrack consisting of remixes and covers was excellent. If you're going to use your money to support this film in any way, do it for the music. My 4th biggest surprise was Paddleton. The Netflix original Paddleton will not be an easy movie for most people to stomach because of its heart-wrenching premise, that of Ray Romano's character helping his neighbor, played by Mark Duplass, comfortably live out the last days of his cancer-ridden life. Given that the ending is about as emotionally devastating as you might expect, I truly must reiterate that Paddleton is a tough watch. If you give it a chance though, you'll find that there is a lot more entertainment value and heart to compensate for the sadness. Running at just under 90 minutes, this quick but powerful story may simultaneously brighten up and ruin your day just like it did mine. My 3rd biggest disappointment was Ad Astra. A lot of the film critics I follow went bananas for this space drama from director James Gray. I was a big fan of his previous film The Lost City of Z, so I also hoped for something at least equally transcendent and beautiful. Indeed, this was gorgeous to look at, but underneath the shiny coat of paint, I found a hollow chassis with a 2-cylinder engine. Despite some great concepts, incredible visuals, and a memorable performance from Brad Pitt, there were simply too many lame plot points and idiotic moments for me to fully get behind this pseudo-intellectual attempt at recapturing the awe of Interstellar. But I can say that seeing this was worth it for one reason, enjoying the experience with the roundtable crew, and then making fun of it for at least 30 minutes straight right after the credits rolled. My 3rd biggest surprise was The Kid Who Would Be King. One of the most criminally overlooked movies of the year was The Kid Who Would Be King, which is essentially if director Joe Cornish took his awesome sci-fi film Attack the Block, made it for kids, and then incorporated Arthurian lore instead of aliens invading the projects. It makes me sad that this was dumped in some random weekend in January with minimal marketing, for despite some lackluster visual effects, this was a legitimately fun adventure that people of all ages and backgrounds could enjoy. Its story generally avoided cliches, had a memorable cast of characters, Rebecca Ferguson hammed it up as the villain, and I surprisingly got a lot out of the emotional and thematic moments. If your family has trouble looking for a good movie to watch on a random night, this is the one to seek out. My 2nd biggest disappointment was Midsommar. Hereditary was not only one of my favorite films of 2018, but is actually now one of my favorite horror films ever. That may not mean I ever want to watch it again, but its effect on me was so profound that I eagerly looked forward to what director Ari Aster did next. I didn't have to wait long to get another ambitious, gorgeously shot horror film from him in A24, but imagine my dismay when I discovered that Aster simply gave into hubris and just plunged right into excess. I'm very happy for the large majority of film fans who loved Midsommar, and I indeed have a huge amount of respect for the performances and technical achievements, but the story did nothing for me. I'll still look forward to Ari Aster's next film, but I just hope he backs down and simply lets his movie do the talking. My second biggest surprise was Greener Grass. The only reason why I watched this is because my man Karsten Runquist put it on his top 10 films of 2019 list. I previously had no interest in Greener Grass, but now that I've seen it, I want to slap the previous version of myself that almost brushed it aside. If you can imagine a film that meshes together the madcap insanity of Monty Python, the sharp social commentary of The Twilight Zone, and then lampooned suburban Utah's culture with intentionally awkward humor, then that's basically what this movie is. Because of that, Greener Grass is either going to be a film you go for, or absolutely despise. Thankfully, I can say that it caught me on a good day, because I absolutely went for this bold, but hilarious vision for poking fun at white America. And for me, the most disappointing movie of the year was easily Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. I still love Star Wars, but after getting burnt out from defending my take on The Last Jedi for the past couple of years, The Rise of Skywalker just broke me. This insanely messy mismatch of idiotic ideas put me off so badly that you can now consider me one of those fans that hates Disney for what they've done to the franchise. Or rather, what they haven't done for it. Episode 9 has just proven to me that Disney cared more to push a trilogy out so that they could start earning back their investment, rather than taking their time to plan out a sensible, meaningful, and exciting story. Instead, they repurposed elements of the original movie into a lesser shell of itself, made a risky but undeniably creative second installment, and then finished things off with plot points so underdeveloped and reactionary that you would have thought that J.J. Abrams and Chris Terrio wrote the script by taking feedback from fans on Reddit. If you want more of my specific thoughts on why I dislike The Rise of Skywalker, you're more than welcome to check out the roundtable discussion I have with Justin and Jared, but in short, this was more disappointing than any other film this year simply because of my love for Star Wars. I want this franchise to be the best that it can be, and currently it's going in some exciting directions with things like Jedi Fallen Order and The Mandalorian, but I never wanted the final film in the Skywalker saga to be lame fan fiction. I'm happy that a lot of you enjoyed this, but as for me, I now consider Return of the Jedi to be where the Skywalker story ends for me personally. But amidst the despair and the sorrow I felt from a disappointment over Star Wars, rose a film from complete obscurity to become my most surprising movie of 2019, which was Ready or Not. I could have sworn that this was going to be garbage. The poster did nothing for me, and I never expected it to be anything but unnecessarily gory schlock. And while Ready or Not was a bit extreme with its violence and profanity at times, I was otherwise dumbfounded by how much fun I had with this thriller that came out of nowhere. That's probably what is most surprising to me about it, because like with Greener Grass, I almost completely missed out on something that had very high entertainment value and an effective message to boot. I'm grateful I chose to give this a try since it was creative, original, tightly paced, and knew how to be playful with its characters in order to keep me invested. It all culminates in a story that literalizes the very nervous thoughts that may rack any newly married young adult, let alone a marginalized woman becoming part of a wealthy family. Please seek this out if you're even remotely curious, because I'll bet that it will surprise even the most cynical movie fans.